Nobody can stop me now. Gangsters in space!
G'day guys, welcome back to the Hobby Hatch. For a long time now I've wanted my own Adeptus Mechanicus gun team, so I thought I'd make my own. So to start this one off, I measured out and cut a piece of cork that would fit nicely on a 130mm base, which I scavenged from a Onega Dunecrawler kit from Games Workshop. I then moved on to working on some 25mm bases, which I filled the underside with milliput, as I'm going to be inverting these so that the bevel is travelling downwards and inwards into the base, which forms a much nicer rim, which we'll see in a bit, because the models that are going to be mounted on these will be wound counters, so I'll be able to take them off and on, and it looks a lot nicer when they're a bit more flush than having that gap. I 3D printed a nice lasgun STL model that I found on my mini factory, as well as a bobby dock, which I meticulously modified to fit on the back, acting as the gun servitor, as well as some very rudimentary sculpting to make it look like he wasn't just flat glued on there. Then I wanted to make some rudimentary cover for one of the models that were going to be set on that base. So using some coffee stir sticks and some super glue, I made a little wall, I guess, which I then cut a channel for in the cork base and cleared that out ready for it. It was at this point that I also cut out the bases, the base holes for the models that were going to be sitting on this. So I just measured the widest point of the bases and cut them all out accordingly. With this done, I mixed up some more milliput because I wanted the bases to fit really snugly, and you can see here I used some extra virgin olive oil to stop the bases from sticking to the milliput. I did use some Vaseline, which I thought would work quite well, but I think due to the gummy nature of it, it just stuck the bases in there and it would pull the milliput off the base. So maybe water would have worked better than olive oil, but it seemed to work for me. Once the bases were pressed in place and I had a nice fit, I sculpted around the outside so it wouldn't look as jarring, and did it for all three. Next, I added the rudimentary wall that I made earlier, and then began adding the texture paste to the overall base. I did this with the removable base in place, as I think it gave me a much closer gap than what I would have achieved if I had have added the texture paste to the larger base and the removable base separately. With that all cured, they fit pretty nicely. There was a little bit of contraction as it dried, but overall the gap is quite small, definitely much smaller than if I had the bases in the opposite direction. Finishes off, then I added some cork just for some scatter to break up the flatness of it, and then I moved on adding some kind of trench boardwalks, something that they can walk along and set their gun up on. With that all done, I left everything to dry and moved on to painting the cannon crew.
Now you push this button.
So once everything was primed black, the general scheme of this was to hit everything with all of the cloth and fabricy bits with a nice light blue. I think this was 1000 Suns blue. And then using the airbrush, I added some very basic light highlight volumes to then I dry brushed over a really bright vibrant blue. This one was Baroth blue. It gave it quite a nice effect in the end. Then rather than doing true metallic metals, it is true metallic metals in the end, but I painted everything with a nice dark grey as opposed to using a dark metal colour or gunmetal colour, and instead opted to dry brush it with a really bright metallic paint. I think this one was Steel by Vallejo, which gave me a nice mottled kind of matte effect to the armour. Everything got a quick wash, and I moved on to the leathers. This model really is metal, fabric and leathers, and then moved on to adding some very basic lighting effects. So I'm not too experienced with doing OSL lighting effects, but I did try my best and got better and better as I painted the models. In this video I've only painted one model and kind of shown the whole way through, aside from the gun. But you know, there's hours and hours and hours of painting footage, so if that's something you'd like to see, let me know. The last thing for this model was to paint in its eye lenses white, and then using some white ink I added some light volumes, sort of trying to make it look like his eyes were glowing. And to that I tinted everything with a contrast yellow paint. And then retouched up the brightest points with white, to which I covered with a fluorescent yellow paint.
Happy is something neurotic, dangerous.
So the last step of this model was to paint in a hazard stripe tube on his back, just add a little bit more visual interest overall to the model, introduce a few more colours. So first step for that was white, pure white paint, and then a contrast yellow, and then finally picking out all the black segments with just a pretty stock standard black paint. And with that, he was done. Quite happy with this paint job, considering it didn't take me too long to do, and I mean, the outcome was way better than I was expecting. I then also painted a few more little characters to go on the diorama. Man with a gun, man with a book, screeching litanies in binaric to the god machine cannon, as well as I think my favourite, this casualty, who has a big fresh las wound straight through the chest and a blown off arm, and of course the blown off hand to match. I then moved on to the gun itself. And first I did the same recipe for the fabric on the little servitor on the back. And effectively the same method for painting all the metals. So this one I went fairly simple with the paint job as far as the cannon metal goes. It's just, once again, light grey or dark grey, and then dry brush with a really bright metallic. And then for the real feature for this gun, I used some reds, which I just faded out, dark to light on the outside. And then over some white ink, I flared up some very fluorescent red paint, which I then blended into at the bottom of the gun to show that it was kind of glowing and ready to fire. But I couldn't stop there. I went in for a nice green glow on the batteries that were behind the servitor firing. So kind of the same recipe or technique here, except this time I used an airbrush to pop in those light volumes, which I then tinted with athematic blue contrast paint. Contrast paint is great for this sort of thing. It's nice and thin, goes on, relatively good coverage when you're using the airbrush. And then I built up that glow again using white ink and a fluorescent green paint from Vallejo. I then made sure to have the glow effect extending out to the little operator's back and down the sides of the battery housing as well. And overall, considering I haven't really done many OSL effects in the past, I was very happy with the result. Then moved on to painting up the diorama base itself. So I started with a nice dark green base coat. This is going to be a Martian landscape to be, in line with the Adeptus Mechanicus theme, to which I then sprayed on lighter and lighter reds and quite a bright orange at the end. Made sure to paint in the bases while they're all inset, to make sure that that transition between the removable bases and the diorama base were as smooth as possible. I then went in with a very bright orange dry brush just to pick out all those details. Later I'll be adding a pigment powder just to add a bit more visual interest, but that was added once everything was glued in place. The last step was to paint in all the wooden colours for the boardwalk and the little wall barricade that I made. And I built this up with a nice dark Rhinox hide and then went over with Baylor Brown. Kind of wet blending this. This was very ad hoc, kind of thrown together at the time. Just kind of smeared paint on it until I was happy with it. And then of course a dry brush to pick out all those edges and details, and all the wooden parts were done. I also painted up some little greebly bits, a gun that was just resting up against some rocks, as well as some little storage containers that I glued in front of the gun, just to kind of add a little bit more visual interest, a bit more clutter, make it look a bit more lived in, like they've been fighting in that position for some time. I really like the idea of having removable gun crews for these types of gun emplacements, with the idea being that when I play games, I'll be able to remove them as it takes wounds, once I figure out exactly what rules it'll play with. And with all that done, the model was effectively finished. All I had to do was paint the rim, and it was on to the glam shots.
A time like this to create what appears to be a state of emotional imbalance.
Oh, I'm balanced. I'm perfectly balanced. Absolutely symmetrical. It's just,
Yes.
Thanks so much for watching, guys. If you like what you saw, leave a like and subscribe if you'd like to see more. It really helps the channel grow and helps me know what you'd like to see more of in the future. Also, leave your feedback and comments down in the comment section below. It really does mean a lot to me to see your feedback or suggestions on how I could do these videos better, or just any topic ideas that you'd like to see in the future. Lastly, I have an Instagram, so if you'd like to stay up to date with the work in progress of these projects or behind the scenes materials, you can find it all over there.
Well, nobody exactly looks forward to...
Thanks again for watching, guys, and I'll see you in the next one.
But it's just you never can tell what the computer has decided.